Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to this week's Top Voice Tuesday with Raul Hernandez. He's another amazing top voice that we're going to get to know here quickly. For those of you dialing in, we had a little technical issue this morning, and so we're recording this and reposting. Very excited for you to check out this episode. As always, this will be on my YouTube channel, Michael J. Lopez 9. And please also go in. You'll see there a link to my newsletter that comes out every week, where we pull insights from this conversation to be able to give you the latest and greatest from all of our amazing top voices, as well as insights from my book, Change, which you can see right in here behind me. But like I talk about in the book, the growth is in the struggle. And we had a technical issue this morning, and we're adjusting and finding a new path and experimenting so thanks for hanging in with us and being a part of this journey. I learn something new every day, and that's what's going on here on April 14th, which is tax day. So double whammy of paying my taxes and having technical issues all at once. So that's part of the fun.
It's all good.
So today's conversation is about using AI to amplify, not replace you. And Raul, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself. And before we jump into that conversation, please tell us, how did you get to the top of the Top Voice Mountain? Because it's a question that everybody wants to understand.
Absolutely. Raul Hernandez here in San Diego, California. I develop growth strategies with founders and their teams and help them implement it to see it through so they can achieve new milestones in their business and life. For the Top Voice Mountain, I meditated on that day in and day out for I don't know how many years, and it just happened. I just woke up and there I was at the top of the mountain.
There was, yes.
But all that to say, really, I frankly don't know. I just think being part of the LinkedIn ecosystem for I think over a decade, connecting with people, commenting, adding as much value as I can into my posts. I think some of that compounds over time. There's not that one thing that you do. I think it's a combination of the ecosystem that you build. And I'm grateful to be recognized as one.
Yeah. It's interesting. People ask me the same question. It's the question I ask everyone to start the show. And a lot of people say what you said, which is, first of all, I don't really know. There's a little bit of a magic 8-ball in this experience that it just sort of happened, but there's a pattern. And, the first part of that pattern is about repetition and consistency. It's about, engaging. Our first episode actually with Graham Riley was really, really an amazing one. It was all about this conversation. And he even talked about the power of commenting on other people's content is just a big piece of this equation. So I think when we started before, you mentioned being at it for several years, right? This idea that it's a consistent pattern of behavior over several years. How did you sort of find your topic and the things that you talk about? What was the process that you used there to kind of discover what you wanted to focus in on?
That's a great question. I think, well, let's dial it back because I first started the podcast in 2018 and I was working with a mentor at the time. And I told him, should the podcast be topical specific, like a specific topic? And that's all I talk about on the podcast, or should it be an ethos? Should it be a mindset or a philosophy of life? And he pushed me towards the philosophy. And then that's pretty cool because it allowed me to talk about nearly anything as long as it related back to the premise of doing good work and what that actually means, not just the act of it, but embodying that behavior in your life. So doing that, repetition, hours behind the podcast, practicing and just learning who I am through the process. Like, how do I show up? How do I think? How does that make it different? And then I also worked on developing the habit to write or at least jot down my ideas every single day, Monday through Friday, maybe some Saturdays. So I do take some of the weekends off. But not writing to publish, writing to say, you know what, I had a client call today and this topic came up. It also came up with 3, 5, 7 other clients. There must be something here. So I use that kernel to like digest, like, what do I think about this thing? I do that enough times. I also develop my own IP around that, like how to go from X to Y. And then what are the steps to get there, and my own unique process or ideas around that. Now I have a library of it and I try to do that every day. If I give talks like this, if I'm on podcasts, if I'm on stage, if I'm working one-on-one with clients, if I'm flying out to meet them, it's all based on that kernel of thought and that ecosystem that I'm now building. When it comes to posting that or translating that into content, we're competing now with everyone's GPT, copy
Yeah.
paste,
Yeah.
mindless scrolling, mindless copy, mindless thinking. Some people are thinking about it, but I think right now, like when you're competing with that, you have to find what can you only say. What is your unique authority that only you can bring to the
Mm.
table, not some sort of chatbot or someone else's, copy and paste from whatever tool they're using. So there's that thinking around it, and I also try to do video because it's at least right now, right? It's still me on the video, so I'm trying to prove humanity and get people to relate on a human level,
Yeah.
not just on an intellectual text level.
Yeah. We're going to talk about that, this competing with other people's GPTs, because we all have them and we all use them, and rightly so, right? And there's a couple things I really want to focus in on what you said there for those folks that are watching this and want to engage with and understand how to move their voice forward. You said a couple really important things, and actually Vince Barano and I were on an episode about a month ago, and we talked about this of the value of writing, right? That the process of writing is about also the process of discovery, right? Discovering your voice,
Mhm.
experimenting with your own tone. And I just wrote a book, and people ask me, well, why don't you just throw everything you've already posted into Chat GPT? And I'm like, no, I want to earn the right to publish this, because those are all my words, right? I typed every single word in that in
Mhm.
that in that book. And it's not just about volume, right? That's what I think a lot of us have focused on in the GPT world is I can just crank out a bunch of stuff, right? And so I think that's a great way to lead into this conversation about amplification. So we talked about this. You use this word, using AI to amplify you.
Mhm.
We talked about it when we first met. Why that word, and what does that mean to you, and why do you focus on that?
Amplify is intentional because you get to choose. Artificial intelligence, machine learning is not new. It's just the way that it's been ubiquitous, and the costs are ridiculously low now for everyone to use. So when when someone says AI at the granular level, like a very simple basic application, and someone says AI at the PhD level, they're not talking about the same thing, but we hear the same thing.
Yeah.
So amplify really means you get to choose. Do you want to continue to expand who you are and your thinking, or are you going to try to outsource your thinking? And just to
Mm,
go back to the point of writing sounds boring or whatever. Writing is just
mm,
thought captured in a moment. So the act of writing is the act of thinking. And if you can't think
mhm.
for yourself, then you are going to be replaced. And I'm not trying to be brutal or mean about it, but the
Yeah.
whole idea is you need to know what you're looking to achieve. What does that end outcome actually look like from your own experience? Because if you don't, and you're creating something net new, and you have no clue if this new thing is actually good or not, then there's danger in relying on the outputs of whatever algorithm or AI that you're using to produce that output, because you don't know quality assurance, you don't know if this safe, you don't know the ethics behind it. And so there is that level of importance to think about your own thinking and think about what things have
Mm,
worked in your life, in your business, in your career, and in your clients. Like, why is some nuanced approach different for change, for example, when you communicate change versus another? All these different things play into the role of, when you're going to use these tools, it's going to amplify the good characteristics that you
yeah.
have, or it's going to actually push it down, and you're going to, unfortunately, think less, become lazier, just go with the vibe, which is a cool trend. And there is an approach where sometimes you're just on the flow and you're just vibe whatever you're doing, if it's coding, if it's writing, if it's, well, whatever it might be. Um, but you also need to make sure, like, hey, am I checking to make sure that this is safe, that this is the right thing to do? Because my own experience tells me that this may not be the right thing to do, if in
Yeah.
case you quality ensure you rewrite.
There's so much there. Let's go back and talk about some of those pieces. You said something that is really very philosophical, which I think is wonderful, right? Think about your own thinking.
Yeah.
I asked my son the other day, he's 17, and we were having dinner, and I said, "What do you think about when you get up in the morning? Like, what's the first thought that goes into your head?" And he
Mm.
said, sort of funnily, that I don't want to go to weights in the morning. And I said, well, most people have that thought too. But like, what are you focusing on? What are you processing, thinking about, planning, executing? And this is the big emphasis of mindfulness, right? Which is to bring your awareness to your thinking. And I think you said something that's really important there, which is, making sure it's right, right? Yeah, I heard this story from Christopher Lind about a lawyer who did some research on on Chat GPT, and it turned out to be wrong, and ended up losing a case. And it was a big deal because you just outsourced your brain and stopped exercising the process of cognition, right? Which is this idea. So let's strip away the doom and gloom, because you did say if you do that, you will be replaced.
Yeah.
Why does that happen? Why do you think we'll be replaced if we're just outsourcing our brains to the machines?
Well, let's start with the first premise. And I was on a call with the CMO yesterday, one of my clients, their CMO, and we were talking about efficiencies and whatever, and implementing AI and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, I brought it back to every person on your team always has to answer, because I work directly with founders, and being a founder myself, they have to answer this question: why are you on the payroll?
Mm,
Why are you on the payroll? Why am I on the payroll? Am I
yeah,
deserving of being on the payroll? And it's less of approach of like, oh crap, I gotta like work out of fear. You gotta work out of magnifying the gifts and the talents that you have. So that's the first premise. The second thing is like, okay, well, why are you actually here? If you are legitimately doing things that can be handed off to something else, because any task in a business, in a company, in a team, there's only three people or three things that can do it. It's either you, someone else, or a machine. And we've had
mm,
automations for years now.
yeah,
Now the automations can do some low level reasoning, and now some to the cost of a little bit expensive, but a PhD level of reasoning. So we're getting to that level. Is like, why are you on the payroll? You got to answer that question. If
yeah,
you're telling me that I can replace your function, your role, with a set of automations, some low level reasoning, some inference, another loop of automation, maybe one quality assurance, and then a
yeah,
publish or a hit,
yeah,
then the question really becomes, why are you on the payroll? If you're like, okay, you know what, I can build this out and manage it, or I can create something that new, or my role needs to be rewritten, or my role needs to be evolved, then you're never going to run out of work, because you're always looking to solve problems.
mm,
So that's that basic philosophical approach. It's like, um, when you're working with different types of people, it'll be like, okay, pay me more and I'll do more work. Or the other attitude is, let me do more work so you can see the value, and then I
yeah,
can earn more because of that. It's
yeah,
just that level of thinking. And we
yeah,
see that depending on who you engage with. If you go, like I went to the mall this weekend, I had incredible customer service from some people. Other people, I felt like, wow, I could have just been at a kiosk and checking out here. So it just depends on your attitude that you bring to it, how you view your skill sets and talents, and most importantly, how you're amplifying those through the tools that you use. Because AI at this point, it's a buzzword. Everyone says it. Not everyone knows what it actually means. It's a tool. How are you going to use the tool?
yeah. There's a great phrase that I use a lot in life, which is, money and power just make you more of what you were before you got it, right? This idea that if you're a good person with money and power, you'll be a good person. If you're not, then you go the other direction. And I think that's what you're describing, right? Is I think the way we approach this opportunity of automation, I think, starts with who we were before we arrived at the moment, right? This
Mhm.
idea that if I'm someone who's always looking to grow and shape and evolve and transform, certainly that's how I operate, and that's why I put a book together that that I did. Then it's, wow, what can I learn from this, and how do I, we use this phrase, freeing up space, right?
Mhm.
Well, the question is, what are you going to replace that with? What are you going to put in the space once you've freed it up? If you're someone who wanted to do the minimum, well, then you'll free up space and you'll do more of the minimum, right? If you're
Mhm.
someone who wants to evolve, well, then you'll free up space and think, wow, what can I put in this new space? So I think that gets us to an interesting question
Mhm.
about, so what do I, as a user of AI, and I'd love, I'm going to ask you in a little bit to tell us like what you use, right? People want to know,
Mhm.
like, what does Raul use in his own AI journey? We're going to talk about that, but let's talk about skills first. What do I need to know or do as a human being now in order to take advantage of the moment?
Okay. So simple habits. Your life is comprised of the simple focuses of every single day life. The two things that I talk with growth on any team is you got to write every day and you got to talk to people every day, and that'll equal business growth. For effectively using these tools, the two simple habits, and there are skill sets, I would say, is number one, to be able to understand how to manage, create, and work with these workflows,
Mm,
create them, edit them, change them. And if you can't figure that out, then that's a huge issue on your part, because you have every single piece of information at your disposal. You got to go find it. Got to
mm,
go figure it out. Go figure it out. Um, and the reason why I say that versus go to this course or do that is because you must figure. The expectation right now is there's no unlearning this. There's no way to move forward in this economy, in the future economy, without knowing that. So that is like a very hard rule. The second one is the ability to problem solve. Problem solve
mm,
has a lot of different words. It could be called creativity. It can be called innovation. It could just be called how do you solve either a new problem in a new
mm,
way with the tools, or an old problem with a new way. So you're solving problems with this new technology, and that becomes amazing because you can save people hundreds of hours legitimately. You can
yeah,
save people days to go to market. You can save people hopefully now with like different drugs and being able to come pharmaceuticals, like save people's lives even
yeah.
faster, or go to market even faster with that. So it really depends. Those are the major two that I'm seeing, and this is more again on a philosophical level. Like you got to know how to create, manage, and execute with these agents, because not just managing people, now you're going to be managing tools and
Mm,
workflows under your belt. I think we've all read, if you haven't read, Toby from Shopify's internal memo that got leaked. It pretty much says like if you're don't ask me for any more resources or hires unless you've tested it out with AI and created that replacement there first.
yeah,
So there's that part, and that could sound like, oh wow, well we're not hiring more people, but that's again thinking of it, the glass is half full. There's going to be
yeah.
way more opportunity because it creates new things that we couldn't do before. I was talking to a friend, and they owned a business. They were they're in the real estate space, and just down the street over here, and pointing. That's why I'm pointing backwards. But I was chatting with him. Is like, don't think about what you can use AI to do what you're currently doing. Like looking down and saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to replace this, clean up shop. Like, okay, that's great. It's a good starting point. Look what you're currently doing, and then just clean up shop. Make it more effective, cost
Yeah.
efficient. Great. Now, look at the things that you can't possibly do. Imagine for a world if there was 10,000 yous doing very specific things every single day. What would that look like? And you're like,
Yeah.
oh crap, I never thought of that. So it's thinking about what is the new thing that you're unable to do right now because you've been doing things in a legacy format. And that goes back to creative problem solving for something that doesn't yet exist. And only humans can do that.
Yeah. For those of you listening, there's some real gems in here. So I just want to kind of restate the thing I think that is the first and most important. Let's call it a hard skill, right? So the first hard skill is you need to be experimenting with, practicing, and learning how to get multiple AI uh, tools, agents to speak to one another in workflow style experiences, right? So there's a production element to this, which is this video. We're recording this, it gets posted, I download it, I do all sorts of stuff with it, right? So how do I take these different agents and get them to work together? And I think that's what you're saying. That's kind of step one. And it's going to take trial and error. It's going to take, there's some things that I've downloaded that I decided, yeah, that's not really working for me. There's some tools that I like that I'm learning how to move through. That's sort of step number one. And I think step number two that you said, which is maybe a hard and soft skill together. I don't really like those terms, but people identify with them. Problem solving, being creative, thinking
Mhm.
differently about the opportunity to connect these things together. And what I put in that word is this idea of nuance, right? I come from the world of change management, and there's methodologies for everything, even big consulting, right? There's methodologies for everything. And very rarely have I executed that methodology in linear fashion from front to back without a moment or an experience or a conversation that required nuance, right? This idea of, oh, this is a different moment. How do I bring that together? And what I hear you saying is that's still the part that makes us uniquely human. And the last thing I'll summarize in your question or in your answer, which I just thought was amazing, you need to talk to people every day
Mhm.
as often as you can. And that's the last part of this experience that I think you're really hitting on.
Yeah, and the point there too, and I'll touch on two things that you mentioned there is the first is, and this is my take, right? So this is one thing that I am not going to change my opinion on, is that AI cannot create net new.
Mm,
that
I
never
think there's some
existed
people that
before.
will debate you on that here soon, right? That
I
there's
mean, they'll just refute their own argument with their own argument. So it's actually a net negative for them to think that way, because when you look at AI, it compiles things that currently exist to try to create a new thing that currently exists. It
right.
only has the information that's been documented digitally. It doesn't have all the non-digital information that we still have, like thousands, maybe 1,500 years of
Yeah.
data. But to create net new, it can create inferences of what could be potential, just like any human can. But because we can think outside of what is and actually look into what is the possibility, I
Mm.
think that's the realm where we can only think as humans. And we can dive deeper into that if you want. But
I would
that
love to.
ability is something, in my opinion, for you, for your listeners to not hand over. Because once you start handing over things, then we're just going to have copy blobs, copy blobs of different ideas in different formats, all the same idea at the end of the day. And that's the thing where it's like, how do you break through the noise or the
Mm.
gray? If you ever seen like those cartoons where everything is in gray because everyone's just in uniformity.
That's
Uh,
right.
so there is that piece as well to problem solving and creativity, and then the soft skills, right? Most hard skills are being legitimately taken down, or not hiring anymore. But the soft skills are still more relevant than they've ever been before.
Yeah, I'm gonna show my bias, and I say this in meetings. I use the phrase hard and soft skills, so I'm guilty of
Yeah,
um, my own shallow thinking in the moment. But uh, I did a post maybe a couple years ago, maybe a year ago, which is why do they call them soft skills when they're the hardest things that we do as people, right?
yeah,
Relating to another human being's experience, understanding their point of view, challenging your own beliefs, shifting your perspective, shifting the perspective of a group of people whom you can't change but only influence, right? Our world is composed of ideas. It is what we are as a species, and so to call those things soft skills, to me, I always find so demeaning of the sort of
yeah,
experience that we're talking about, right? Which is, at the end of the day, you have to move a person emotionally, sort of neurologically, conceptually, in their beliefs, and that is really, really difficult, right? And so if everything's just talking to each other from an automation engine, then kind of what's left. But you're talking about using the tool in the right way, and
mhm.
let's talk some details. Let's
Let's
tell us
get
a little bit about
practical, right?
yeah. Tell us a little bit about how you use AI to amplify what you do.
I use a lot of the APIs. So APIs from Claude, Anthropic, and OpenAI. And here, before we dive into like the actual tactics, which is what everyone loves, know that the strategy and the thinking of what we're talking about is superiorly important, because the tactics will be outsourceable, the cost will go down, and we're all addicted to the dopamine of tactics. You still have to think in terms of strategies and frameworks before you
Yep.
apply the tactic, because if not, you're going to try to do the same thing, because to do one thing, there's 20 ways to do that one thing. Just as Michael, we talked about it, like editing this podcast, you can scorch the earth
Right.
doing one thing, or you just make it super simple and just like do that one thing. So
Yep.
it depends on your cup of tea there. But so practically speaking, I leverage automation software, Zapier, Clay, and these are just like softwares to be able to connect with each other in different APIs. I use Pro for OpenAI. I've tested Operator. It was pretty interesting. But I use a lot of the APIs, and a lot of custom. Uh, the new language is English. So if you know how to write really good English to be able to dictate to a machine and follow the prompt guidelines, you're able to create really cool prompts that do amazing things. But right now, it's either saving two things. It does majorly two things. Number one, it takes research and it cuts it by 1,000 X sometimes, and be able to get you the answers faster, or dig through data and give you actionable steps that only you as a human can take. Practical example, go to market. What am I doing right now with some clients? Legitimately that, researching, buying signals, inferences in the marketplace, what's going on with the tariffs, what's going on with the economy, how is that affecting business, how do we create inferences based on our best customers and our solutions, based on that, who's the best person to talk to, based on that, what's the researcher buyer report, why should we talk to them, based on that, how should we talk to them, based on that, what should we say, what's the new, and you can automate all of that, so that your action, instead of going, oh, I got to spend 10 hours researching, which is not an exaggeration, to do all this prospect, prospect, you can just say, you know what, I got this intelligence arsenal. let me do the one thing that AI can't do. Let me build a relationship.
Mm.
Let me take them out for coffee. Let me see what they're working on. Let's see if I can make an offer. Let me see if I can make a proposal with them. And that's the bridge. The other thing that it does well is create, and creating, for example, either video, image, and we've seen this again, text. So those are the major two components that I look at. But right now, I use it a lot for intelligence gathering and informing the right actions to take. Because the one thing that we have limited is time and energy. I don't care what you're telling me. Like I get tired in the afternoon. I'm like, you know what? I'm
Yeah.
good. I go for a walk, maybe get some sunlight, maybe drink some of that tea. But I'm not going to work till like 9 p.m. Like I get
Right.
tired nowadays, right?
Right.
So time and energy. How are you utilizing that to the maximum potential? Doing things that only you should be doing. We can talk about that framework as well. As what is the highest leverage thing that you should be doing, not can be doing, but should be doing.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about that in here just a second, and I want to make sure we're getting close to the end of our time, and just sort of talking about this. And I want to. We've already hit some big high points, and I do want to talk about that last piece because it's really, I think, what people are interested in terms of what's left, right? What's left when I've been able to automate the things that I can. This idea of intelligence gathering. I say this to people. There's even in my book, we know more about the human brain and body than at any point in human history. We know more about everything than at any point in human history. By default, that makes sense. But this idea that you have access to all the information you need, your goal is to assemble that and to help assemble that in ways to solve novel problems, which is
Mm-hmm.
what you've just been really describing, right? And then I think this idea of freeing up space is not just about what can I create that's new that I can turn into something that either didn't exist or that for me is additive in terms of the things I'm trying to accomplish, right? And this idea of building a relationship to me is just it's so funny. I've had people reach out to me as an entrepreneur. Everyone's trying to monetize you in some ways, right?
Mm.
I'm going to do another post on this because I'm sort of sick of it a little bit, but everybody's got their process for let me build you a funnel. Mark Fuentes was on. He was talking about the funnel is kind of dead and all this stuff of like, people are like, oh, you can just do more, just get more people in the front end, turn more people through, use automation to reach out and connect. And there's nothing wrong with that initially.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're talking about something a little bit deeper. So what is left over when we've been able to connect all the agents, learn the APIs, ask better questions to be able to solve novel problems? What's left? What's left for us to amplify who we are?
That's a brilliant question. I thought about that. I had it's funny because in 2010 or 2011, I had a nuanced insight that the more technologically advanced that we get, the more human we'll have to become, the more feet in the grass we'll have to be. And we did see that movement of a lot of that, like different pieces in 2015, 16, and even now more so. But what's left truly is the relationship that you have with yourself and with others, and how you're building a new world or a new opportunity or a new business or a new family or a new relationship. Because at the end of the day, when you look at this, I think we're going to be far from. I mean, in years' time, like I don't know what the years are going to look like, but it's definitely condensing. We're not to the point where everything's just going to be completely automated. This is going to get political. This is going to be like
Mhm.
made in the USA now. Is going to be made by human hands only,
Mhm.
made without. It's going to get to that point.
Yeah.
It's also going to get to the point where some people are going to deject it and never use it, or never want to use it and make that their goal. And others are going to be more like, hey, my car drives itself, it parks itself, I go up, and it just takes me to where like this little seat takes me wherever I go, and then all
Yeah.
my thinking is already created for me, and this is my digital duplicate. So ask it a question and only me specific things. So there are some things that you can get on both ends. I think the key thing that lasts are what are the things uniquely you, um, and what are the things that are uniquely human, which goes to my original opinion. Well, I think it's a fact, but maybe that's because it's a strong opinion. AI doesn't have consciousness. And no way, even when you define AGI, when you hear these researchers and how they define it, it doesn't define it with consciousness. It just defines it with high level of reasoning that will fool us to believe that it has consciousness, but it actually doesn't really have consciousness. And that's because our minds can actually deject or be out of matter. So we don't need matter for our intellect to
Yeah.
actually exist. But
Mm.
AI needs matter. It needs atoms and bits because atoms are coding it, like humans are coding it, and it needs
Yeah.
bits. So it still needs a physical infrastructure. Like we still need NVIDIA chips. You still need the silicon,
Yeah.
right? So I think whatever, like if you want to do Maslow's, it's just amplifying or self-actualizing who you are,
Yeah.
and ideally you do that in a positive way to serve others.
It's beautiful. I was not expecting as much. Not because I don't know you and I think you're inspirational, but we had a different plan talking about some of this about sort of skills. And I think what I love about where we've ended up is this idea of really reasserting the humanness of what this is all about, right? And some a heavy dose of inspiration that look, we all have a choice to make, right? And that choice is deeply personal, and it's deeply human, and it's uniquely human. I say this all the time. I said it in my book. I say it when I give talks. There is a fundamental truth about human existence. No two brains will ever be the same. It's impossible. No two people can ever have the same experience. It's impossible. Even people in the same room are
Mhm.
not having the same experience for all sorts of reasons. And I love what you've kind of said without saying is that AI can only ever know what we know,
Yeah.
right? It relies on our unique experience to feed it. And so find the moment and the opportunity to kind of reassert that, who am I? Who am I here? Who am I in this moment? How do I use these tools to direct me towards something new? I had an interesting conversation with my brother-in-law a little bit ago. We were talking about AI. He's a lawyer. He's very, very rational, very, very, linear kind of thinker and very certain about a lot of things. And he's very
Mhm.
smart. He's brilliant. And he was talking about this AI, and the kind of question I left him with was, well, he said, well, it it knows everything, and I said, well, it depends on your definition of intelligence,
Mhm.
right? Knowing is not the same as understanding, right?
Yeah.
And it's not the same as experiencing, right? And I think that's what's been really illustrative for me in this conversation. Before we get to your bonus question, Raul, and I love the one you left for next week. What are like the three things you want people to take away from this conversation?
The first is to think about your own thinking. I don't care if you publish it, just write it down. Think about your own thinking. Second, identify what are the things that are below you that you should outsource to AI, some low level reasoning, some automations. And then think about the mind experiment. If there were 1,000 yous right now, like 1,000
Mm.
like duplicates of you doing high level work, what would that work be? What would be the outputs and what would be the engine or the inputs that you need to develop it with? And how do you dictate that in English? And then see if you can train up a few prompts or a few agents to do some of that work for you to solve a real business problem, not just like a hypothetical idea.
Mm.
Go solve a real problem that actually adds revenue to your business or to your company right now. Doing that, you'll learn way more than just listening to me. And second, you'll actually do what few people can actually do is ROI on this thing.
I love that. Go learn these tools, experiment, make mistakes, try again, download new things, and try to patch them together. Learn these prompts, learn how to ask better questions, learn how to be creative, solving novel problems. And I think you said in a way that drives ROI. What a great summary! What a great reminder that we are, at the end of the day, still the drivers of this bus.
Mhm.
Our hand is still on the wheel, and that really means a lot of things. So your bonus question before we drop, which I think is just beautiful timing, is what in your life, given what you're experiencing now, what are you being called to be more curious about that's new for you?
Curious about to what's new for me. Oh, to melt away any friction from doing the thing that I know I must do at the very moment and actualizing it now.
Give us an example.
Oh, like, oh, I got to do that proposal, but oh, let me just go check the news or what's going on right now, or just simple things like that. Like, what are the small micro habits that if I completely eliminated would change my psychology, my conscience, and to be able to, whenever it's like something the right thing to do, I don't even hesitate, just do it.
Mm. I love that this curiosity of how to initiate movement in the direction of our goals, where we're removing the obstacles that we quite often put in our way ourselves, right? This idea. And I was thinking about this weekend, my wife was gone and I had a list of stuff to do, and it was a big list, and I love lists. I love doing things like that on the weekend. And the mindset I had, or what I kept saying, is do one thing. Just do one thing right now, and then when that's done, do one thing right now. And
Yeah.
before you know it, you'll stack a bunch of one things together. And so I love that curiosity to how to be better at that experience, I think is great. Raul, this has really been amazing. Thank you for withstanding the early technical difficulties of this call and jumping back on. I'll make sure we post this and share this. For those of you that are listening, we'll put all of Raul's links in the bottom of the show notes so that you can follow him. He really is incredible. Please do subscribe to the channel. Go subscribe to the newsletter, the Friday Focus newsletter on my website. Raul, do you have anything you want to leave the listeners with, where they can reach out to you, any offer to them to connect, or whatever that may look like for you?
Yeah, just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Raul Hernandez Ochoa. You'll get all the links to the website, free blog, books, podcasts, etc.
I would recommend for everyone to do it. He's the best. I've learned so much from you in the short couple months that we've been together. You've transformed my own workflows, and I'm stepping into this moment myself, learning how to use these tools. I thank you for that, for coaching me up as well. Thank you all for tuning in. Thanks for withstanding the technology today. We'll be back live next week. Thanks again. Have a wonderful week, everyone.
Thank you, Michael.